So your street trees are still there.
Okay, this just seems huge. And one of the problems I had was I guess I need to see the picture of your corridor that you had, because there's something about the signs, the sandwich board signs, and the signs of the businesses. Are they too much clutter? And I thought that was way beyond the scope of what I thought these goals were. And the red, what do the red stars mean?
Okay, so just to first off, the list of things were just a list of the elements that you visually see and that contribute to the aesthetics of a corridor. I'm not suggesting that we are going to make new sign standards, but those are all the elements that I think comprise the aesthetic quality of a corridor. Now, it may be that the council says, yes, we agree, those do all affect, but we wish you to focus on this and not look at signage at this time. Or you want to have the steering committee work through the effort and decide what it is that they may wish to recommend to the council. But those are all the elements that you visually encounter when you're coming into a roadway corridor, and they do all have a effect upon what the aesthetic appearance of that area is. The red cross signs are really just locations where you transition, and they're not precise locations. I mean, especially if you go up North Main, they're trying to define where you are leaving kind of the downtown urbanized core and entering into a highway commercial corridor. So where you start to move out in larger lots and larger scale uses. And so those happen somewhere in the proximity of the bottom of the North Main Hill, or they happen near the South Couplet, or they happen somewhere on the 3rd Street corridor in the Lilly vicinity potentially, or they happen on the East Highway 8 corridor at about that South Couplet location as well. So that's kind of where, if I were to say that you were looking at a roadway corridor from some point of entry to some transition to the urban core, the areas highlighted in green are kind of those segments of the roadway that I think you would be looking at if you were focusing on with the concept of what does that corridor look like, what's the common aesthetic in that area, what are the common treatments you would apply in that area. As you get into the downtown area, it's kind of a different animal. You're into a more urbanized setting. It's maybe not appropriate to have landscaping between the right-of-way buildings, because you're looking to try to establish buildings closer to the property lines than the right-of-way. And so that is a different character of development in that core. And so those are the general, where it goes from the rural setting, crossing the city limit boundary, to the urban center of the community. When I talk about corridor, those are kind of the common character corridors that I'm suggesting we could look at.
Tom?
I think this is really good. I think it feels very well reasoned and laid out and organized, and gives us good direction on what we need to do for figuring out what the next steps might be. So, we get to the end of this process, September, October, and then we have a better sense of how we want to proceed from there. And we'll have some, probably some concrete improvement. Perhaps. I think we'll have some solid improvement on what we want to do. So I think that's good.
Okay. Sue, you didn't. Would you like to elaborate on the administrative committee's discussion of this topic?
No, we just basically said that the council should look at this, because there's so many different parts of it. There's the whole list that Bill brought up, and the whole concept of what does the council want to do in terms of, does this studying fit the goals? I mean, it just seemed like something that was just too big to take apart at administrative committee. Plus, we were kind of running out of time.
Okay.
Very short on time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So I saw Wayne's hand, and then Tim after Wayne.
you.
Go ahead, Wayne.
Why would you not continue on down through Jackson and up through Washington, even though it's much more urbanized design, as you said? I think that there is probably some needs through the core area, too, for some beautification and maybe some rules and maybe some regulations that I mean, I think it's great as we come into the downtown area or into the city and the city limits, but I think as traffic flows, we need to continue that look all the way through town.
And that, if the council wishes, I was trying to take it from an entryway that could be a fixed location and not grow it to the entire community. and trying to focus on these entry corridors, and then the downtown could be a second following effort to pick up where this left off and look at other improvements that could be potentially proposed in the downtown core. But they are of different character. There is some transition point. There are going to be different treatments that you're going to suggest in those areas where you're transitioning from something that's more urban to something that's less urban. And so, these breakpoints aren't certainly set in stone in any fashion, and we can work through that with the subcommittee or the steering committee to see if there are changes or tweaks that they would suggest. But at some point, there is a change in character, and there's going to be a change of treatment and a change of standards. And so the highway corridors just coming into community seem to be the place to start, and then we could kind of move beyond that in a future phase of the project.
Tim?
I'm generally in support of funding the study. I guess my concern is that the group is going to come back with a $5 million project or some number between 0 and huge. And I'm wondering if, what comes first, the horse or the cart? Do we set a limit to the scope of what this group is going to be allowed to do and a dollar amount attached to that? Or we just wait and see what the committee comes up with and then cherry pick it in the future?
If I may, there are a couple different approaches the council could certainly take. I think the outcomes that I would envision is that we would do an inventory of all. First, we do a scan of all public right-of-way, look at and inventory locations where beautification efforts might be appropriate or targeted. So there'll be some portions of right-of-way that's undeveloped, in poor condition. There may be little slivers of leftover right-of-way from roadway alignments or other projects. And so there's going to be an inventory of all the areas in the public right-of-way in these corridors that could support either some level of frontage improvement or some level of landscape improvement. The committee may make a recommendation that there may be some elements related to private development that they suggest the council consider as a policy, so that maybe that there's some frontage landscaping on redevelopment of property, so there may be some recommendations regarding that. There may be some consideration of level of care. So certainly ITD can only come through and mow grass and take care of weeds on the edge of the right-of-way only so often, and maybe the city council wishes to consider a higher level of care of those areas. And so we will look at all of those elements, and what I would suggest from the actual project list is that they would prioritize top 3, 4, 5 projects that are of modest scale. That's where we would probably direct the professional services to go directly into developing either concept or typical landscape designs in those areas that would be of a reasonable cost. And there may be a list of another 50 sites, but we all understand that that may be a year-long or multi-year effort, taking small pieces at a time. But I think we can help guide them in just identifying the locations, prioritizing the top 1 to 5. And also I think it'd be interesting to work with the Chamber to see if there's a potential partnership opportunity with businesses along these corridors. For example, in the Troy Highway project, when we did the landscape improvements for Nampa and Peasant People 2, it was kind of a cooperative project with the adjacent property owners who assumed maintenance of those landscaped areas into the future while the city did the installation. So there's probably a host of ways that could be approached. I think we certainly will steer them away from something that's not financially feasible. Look at it in a targeted, phased, approached manner and try to keep it at a reasonable scale. So I'd suggest have them just do an inventory of everything that's there, make recommendations on what they think are the highest priorities. We'll certainly work with them in keeping things that are reasonable within the city's financial capabilities and look at the greatest benefit for the least or modest investment. And then those will just come forward to the council, and I think the council will have the choice will have the opportunity to review that and decide how they wish to proceed from that point.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that reply.
Sue?
I was just going to say, generally in traveling, I tend to see the entrances to cities being further out, kind of so you know that you're getting into the area as opposed to the core. I think the corridor, the interior corridor, and especially in terms of like say Legacy Crossing and that kind of signage, and would be really neat, but I was looking at the overall city, and I guess my priority was when we find out where the southern entrance is, that we define a southern entrance to the city so that we don't bypass the city and oops, we missed it. Because when you have that many lanes coming in, it's possible to not know when you're there.
Certainly, once the alignment is defined and IT starts to get into design effort, there are a host of potential amenities that the city may wish to try to see if it could be incorporated in their project, whether ITD could fund it or the city wishes to try to supplement funding to that. I mean, the kind of the entry to Lewiston on the bottom of the grade, some of the art improvements, installations, and some of the improvements in that area may be a concept, not to say modeling that, but
Right.
the idea of trying to add some of those amenities into that project, whether it's the city saving some funding up over the course of the next couple of fiscal years before the project goes to construction. But now's the time to really have that conversation with ITD, identify the locations for visitor information signage, the entry signage, and other amenities we may wish to add within that project, whether ITD can incorporate those or whether the city may need to financially participate in that effort. So the southern entryway certainly would be a significant one, although we won't be able to make much concrete design at this point in time, but at least we can identify some of the elements that need to be incorporated at that, so when it comes to the construction stage, those can be considered.
Other discussion or more discrete direction for city staff? Walter?
Thank you, ma'am. I like Tim, am concerned that this is the project that's going to come back in a 3-ring binder printed on both sides of the page that will be a great doorstop for somebody because there's no way we can afford it. This was not really what I envisioned when I proposed the original goal. Although if this is how we have to follow the trail to get to the end, that's okay. I just don't believe that people driving into Moscow for the first or second, or in my case, thousandth, umpteenth time, really are thinking, boy, this is not a very nice entrance to the city of Moscow, and are looking at the condition of the roadway surface, the condition of road edge improvements, street signage and lighting, although I call Tyler Palmer every time I see a street light out, other public amenities, whether or not it's got public art missing. Gosh, I just drove in from Coeur d'Alene and there's no public art on the north end of Moscow. That there are overhead utility lines, that the right-of-way edge condition is bad, or that the private signage is too much or too little. I can go out tomorrow and walk up and down the street, and I will almost guarantee you 9 out of 10 people will name one thing at each end of this town that bugs them in terms of the appearance of the entries into Moscow. Miss that, then I'm going to be sorry I ever asked for this goal and spent $35,000 of the city's money.
I think the challenge is what's on private property and where can the city affect change? Where can we plant vegetative buffers or obstruct the views that some people find unwelcoming?
Well said.
Wayne?
Yep.
I agree with what's been said. I would like to see a much more scaled down approach on this. I too can see this. This to me has visions of 4 years ago when I asked for a simple traffic count on 3rd Street turning into a 7-figure multimodal transportation study. I'm still looking for my figures on 3rd Street. So, yeah, I can see this thing really snowballing to the point to where it becomes an elephant. You don't know which end to eat first. And I don't even think we need to spend that kind of money on this. So I think we need to scale this back.